ahead and call the December 11th, 11 a.m. policy meeting to order. And if everyone is okay with it, we will go ahead and proceed with the agenda that was posted. Let's see. At this time, we don't have any public comments, and so we're going to move straight into the policies for review, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Graham to get us started.
Thank you. So we're going to get started today with policy BBB, board membership and elections. This is a policy that is being updated based on the change in the legislation regarding how our board will be elected beginning in 2024. So you can review the language here. It is almost word for word the same from the statute, and includes information about the elections in 2024, as well as how board members will be elected beyond 2024. And I am aware that there were a few typos here. Those have been corrected in the copy that will be used going forward. Any other questions or concerns about this?
I don't have any. I feel like it was exactly in line with the law, so.
Good to meet you. Okay, so we will send this policy on for first reading to the full board.
Thank you. Next up, we have IJOB, and I wanted to mention that this one is recommended for deletion along with IJOC and IJOCR. And then there are new proposed model policies, IJOB/IJOC and IJOB/IJOCR. Because the new models were so different than what we currently had, it didn't really make sense to redline them. So I'm recommending deletion of IJOB, and then we can review the new model separately. Does anyone have a concern about deleting that and moving to the communication IJOB, IJOC policy?
I don't really have a concern. I was looking at it briefly, and I was curious as to the reason between switching between like volunteers or community resource person speakers. Like, definitely want to make sure we're not like shutting out like access to volunteers in any way, shape, or form either. So I just want to double look at the verbiage and make sure like it's kind of more encompassing, because I think if you just reserve it to community resource persons and speakers, makes me wonder, does that like count parents? Does that count like, you know?
Sure. So when we look at the model policy, it defines specifically a volunteer as any person who provides services without compensation or benefits on an occasional or regular basis. It says that that person just has to be 18 and they can do their volunteer work in the class, district sponsored service, learning, community service. So I think it's differentiating. Originally, the policy talked about volunteers versus community resource being like speakers that came in. I think of it like a career day,
Right.
Or someone, who came in and gave a specific curriculum related presentation, as opposed to maybe helping to, make something in a classroom or, sit reading with a group, something like that. And so they were initially two separate policies, but the recommendation is to combine them into one, because it's really talking about what are the requirements for that person and what are the supervision requirements, requirements that we equate them with our school policies, et cetera. And so those would really be the same for both types of people coming into our school.
Would I be wrong to suggest that the very last line really captures both anyway, and that is that it's up to the building principal to approve those visits, right? So you're combining, the concept together into one, but
Change, actually. Now it says.
Right, that's actually in the old one.
that's the old one.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, the old,
Yeah.
that's the old one, that's,
So-
now it's just.
It doesn't say anything
Well,
about.
We'll establish procedures for security.
Okay.
Resource person.
Okay, so there'll be a regulation that goes with that.
Yes, there is an administrative rule, as well as the practices that are given out. We have a volunteer handbook, and then Ms. Passmore is here, so you can speak about that. But we have a training that Ms. Passmore provides to the schools regarding volunteers who come into the schools, what the expectations are, how the schools should prepare for those volunteers, et cetera. And then the district provides support to them throughout the year for any questions that they have about their volunteer programs. But it is decentralized. It's in the schools and that's listed in the policy. That the principals manage their individual programs and the
Okay.
district provides consultation services to them about the
I just
expectations.
didn't want to take that. Consistent.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to deleting those and then forward evaluated ones.
Okay, so would that be IJOV, IJOC, and IJOCR
Yes, for deletion.
for deletion? And then we will move to IJOV/IJOC, which is the model. And one recommendation that I had here was in the third paragraph, the last sentence, to change the last portion to say under the direction of a district employee, because they may not always be a certified teacher, depending on in what area the student is volunteering, or the person is volunteering or assisting.
What do you want to change to?
Just district employee.
Where is that again? Where you
Instead of
Certificated?
certificate.
I will actually say that several people have asked me if that was even a word, and we looked it up, and it is a word. I'm like, but not all of the people who would be overseeing volunteers are always certificate
like a
holders.
TA
They could be a
sometimes.
TA, they could be a different type of district employee. And so we just wanted to make that clear that it didn't necessarily have to be a certified teacher who was overseeing, but it did have to be a district employee. Volunteers should never be solely responsible for students.
I support that change.
Just reading the rest. Sure. It's not very long, just sitting here reading.
And the third paragraph addresses the concern about principals that the program is decentralized. Each principal or teacher plans for the resource person or volunteer help that helps their school.
When this is each principal or teacher plans for the resource person, is that essentially saying that it's up to the principal or teacher? Or do you, like, were you asking that you want like the principal to for sure sign off on it? But that, so the way I read this is it's saying that the principal or the teacher can plan for the resource volunteer. Do you want to add?
But the
with-
teacher can. The
Yeah.
teacher can say volunteers can come in without having to get
You know,
approved.
That's what I was asking,
Yeah,
what
they
he
just-
was.
As long as they're following SOP.
Yeah, they have to
Okay.
sign in and they're
Yeah.
going through the whole process, but you wouldn't have to every time you have a volunteer.
Yeah, I agree. I just wasn't sure if that's what you were trying to say when you were saying, okay.
I just didn't want the district office to be the decision maker.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
As far as to the buildings.
Yeah, the district office is just providing consultative services to them on the overall expectations of the program and letting them know what's in the administrative rule, et cetera.
With that change.
Ready to move that one?
Yes,
First
so
reading.
we'll move that one to first reading.
Okay.
Rule now.
Yes, IJOB/IJOCR. This one just provides more specificity to the expectations. And one recommended change here was under the procedures on the third bullet point, that the end of that sentence, instead of with it, would be changed to within the school. Expects of all persons who work within the school. Just make it a bit more clear.
Are we changing that certificated?
We can, it is technically an appropriate form of the word. It is just an odd form of the word that we don't use. But we could just change it to say certified person as well.
Says it again. Yeah, or certificated teacher. Good either way. I mean, as long as it's
I
a
don't know if
word.
people will think that it's not really a word, but we can change it to say certified.
You would always say certified.
Yeah.
Is there anything in policy, and I'm reading through briefly, that states, like, I remember like PTA people used to like bring in kids and stuff like that sometimes when you're volunteering, like, is there anything that prohibits that or anything that just based on like at the discretion of the principal or?
So volunteers are supposed to be required to be 18 so that they can have a background check.
Like sometimes they bring like a early, kind of pre-K age child or something when they're volunteering. So is that allowed?
I mean, it's certainly a liability issue. I don't know where we stand on that practice-wise right now, but it is,
Which is leaving it at the discretion of the principal and not writing policy. I was just curious if there was anything.
yeah, I don't think that it is specifically addressed here, except to say that all volunteers must be 18, which I think could be interpreted to mean that you can't have minor children there.
So would that be left up to the principals then if they choose not to? Because I do know that there are some principals that do not, they request that younger children, younger than school age, not come.
Right. Well, I know like when we were when I was on the PTA, like our PTA president always had her child there. I know when I served and Dylan was little, I would have to bring him in with me. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to serve, and at the discretion of the principal, they allowed it because the child technically wasn't a volunteer. The child was there as a child with said volunteer. So I mean, I think it could be argued also that the child is not the volunteer.
True, it's still a liability risk. I would say from a practice standpoint, I'm not really sure what all of our schools are doing. I think, that's not something that we've provided direct guidance on.
I'm not opposed to leaving it as.
But
it
it's
is.
not specifically written in here. So.
Okay. I just actually didn't want to like necessarily stop that from happening if it was. I'm good on everything else.
I am as well, so if there's no other questions or comments or thoughts, then we will move this on to the first reading.
The next policy is IKAB, report cards and progress reports. This is very minor updates considering that the policy hasn't been updated since 2001, but I think the practice has remained pretty consistent and just identifies what should be included in report cards, and the conferences, interim reports, et cetera, are all important to the success of our students. So.
That was pretty minor. And I had questions on or concerns about or felt needed added. Did you?
No. Anyone else?
That's a pretty standard one.
So are the report cards still mailed out at any level?
I don't think so, are they?
My kids get a printed copy typically sent home with them, but it's usually just a, but like they'll come home with like a little.
It's all emails?
Email. I just check hours through. I don't think that's even.
It's been a while since, I think that predates me. I know my experience we had been sending report cards home for several years. Yeah.
Right, okay, looks good then. So this is on IKAB first reading.
Can somebody request like a paper copy?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel certain that we would prevent that if requested. All right, the next policy is IKE, promotion, retention, and acceleration of students. Excuse me, this is one that we, the board did just recently review and recommend changes to. However, some additional changes have come to light that need to be made to that, especially in line with the new report card procedures for promoting high school students, et cetera. So there are some recommended changes here. I don't know, Ms. Eastep, if you want to present those, or as we look, I think first we'll look at the area of promotion for kindergarten through 8th grade students. I don't have the notes.
I think we were fine with promotion down through 9 through 12, down to 9 through 12, and then we had information there that we needed to change again based on the new policy, the new things from the State Department. So a total of 6 units of credit, including 1 English unit, 1 math unit, and 1 science unit needed to be changed. So I'm trying to get
It's okay. I have those if you want me to go through. The concern that I had, sorry, to go back to promotion was, I think there was a concern that basic was no longer an appropriate standard under state mandated testing. So, do we have, no, that's okay. Do we have a proposal for what that should state?
If it's met,
Okay.
but I don't know.
We don't hire.
That's a school, so we just had to remove it, but.
Yeah, I mean, we could just strike it as well.
Until,
Because then that would still leave, achieving at least a passing grade and meeting the attendance policy, and would leave out how they did on state mandated testing to determine their promotion level. Are we okay
Why
with
would we
that?
want to remove that though? I mean, I think that is a good metric to have.
Well, basic is, you can't leave basic there because that's no longer,
What is the standard of measurement? Is it meeting, exceeding, and
right,
below?
but we don't get the scores.
Below meeting.
Does not mean.
Does not mean.
We don't get the scores back until July.
So that, yeah,
We don't like.
very good point. See, this is when we have it on here. Which is so silly to me, but I digress on that. Yeah, that makes sense, that definitely. Thank you for bringing that up.
so are we okay with just striking that first bullet point there?
What's a passing grade then? Like for that,
A 60 or 90?
and what would a D be on state testing? Would that be meeting expectations?
No, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak to
Or
it,
like,
I
I'm
know that
just
they
trying to
always
like,
do
if they're
it late.
comparable, like, is that
Yeah.
meeting like grade standards and D? Do we really want, I don't know, I'm just.
Well, and I don't want to speak for our curriculum folks, but
Yeah.
I'm also reminded of the research that states at a certain age, retention, social retention, based on why their grades or their performance is the way it is not effective. So at a younger age, you see where your gaps are, you provide them tutoring and interventions, but you keep them moving with their peer group. Because that actually is detrimental to their growth and achievement if you pull them back based on that.
What grades is that? 'Cause this is, we're looking at 3 through 8. I would see that like maybe.
Well, I know everybody hears the term, if they're not reading at grade level by third grade, that they'll never catch up, but honestly,
It's hard.
it's all the way through your elementary school years until you really get into middle school, you can then start to look at it, but because a lot of times it can be based on maturity, not cognitive ability.
Do you feel
Speaking
like
out
a
loud,
passing
that'd be
grade
very
is sufficient
unfortunate.
standard for 3rd through 8th graders? A 60%?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if they're passing,
For passing.
yeah, I don't see how you can, I mean, passing is passing.
All right, and then, I'm sorry that I took us back, Ms. Eaton, if you want to walk through, or I can, as we look at grades 9 through 12, I think there are several changes to those bullet points there. Okay.
So basically, we said overall, we wanted to take out any specific references to any particular courses, like English 1, English 2, English 3, because not all of these are those taken necessarily in sequential order. So the first one, like I said, was from 9th to 10th grade, we wanted it to read 6 credits, including 1 English, 1 math, and 1 science. From 10th to 11th grade, 12 credits, including 2 English, 2 math, 2 science, and 1 social studies. 11th to 12th grade, 18 credits, including 3 English, 3 math, 2 science, and 2 social studies. And then under the graduation requirements, we wanted to reflect the difference between 9 GR 24s and earlier, so that 9 GR 24 includes a half credit personal finance and 6.5 credits of electives. And then the 9 GR 23 and earlier, there's not a personalized finance requirement because that just came out. And then that would be 7 electives. So we wanted to put those specifics in there.
So if you do it this way though, I guess, does it mean that they have to take any certain classes any certain year or not really? You understand what I'm asking?
Well, there is a pathway that, like, you could, there are courses that have prerequisites, so you can't take them necessarily out of order. But there are some that are not that way, so you could, and then there are some that you can take first semester and second semester. So you really need to use the course guide to see what those prerequisite courses are. I think that's what you're asking.
Sort of, yes, I guess. I'm just thinking, so like, do you have to take a science class your freshman year, no matter what? Is that what you're trying to, like,
Yes.
get to? You have to.
So like, but you're saying to remove this, the specific like English 1 and 2, because they might take that all.
Or they might take it in eighth grade.
Yes, like, earlier, and if you put it in that, you're kind of messing up their ability to kind of do that in the order that they
So
were to
every year, they
or-
have to have an English and a math every year, including senior year or? Yes.
Yeah.
Every year. No.
I will
It's
say
also
that's
a
one,
requirement for the
that's a state requirement, but I would say that
scholarships.
that's another reason why we're very,
But what if you take it early?
that's what I'm saying, we're very cautious because you
because
can run
end
out
up-
of math courses.
Right.
Now, they may not be in sequential form if you take algebra and geometry at the, middle school level, and you run out of courses you can take, credit course, a college bearing course, or you can take another math course that wouldn't typically be in that sequence, but it meets the requirement of having math.
So even if you meet your required amount of math credits to graduate per se, like your junior year, you still have to take math senior year no matter what. That's silly. Okay. I mean, not silly, but
I
I know
also,
that.
am I wrong? Is it more part of the life math scholarship?
Okay, yeah. Because I know some kids like, already like,
That's
my
a
kids
state-
went into
is that
high
a state?
school with the high school
That's a
math
scholarship
credit,
requirement too, for the life
So your
scholarship.
freshmen already have 2 math
Yeah.
credits,
Yeah.
And we also encourage that they consider not skipping English and math because they will have to take that as a general ed course, especially if they're college bound, and having that gap will not prepare them as much as having it. So like Dr. Robbins said, we may encourage them to do an advanced course, like dual enrollment or an AP course, so they're actually getting credit in high school and college credit at the same time. And that helps offset the cost. And a lot of times students are able to narrow down a 4-year span to a 3.5 or a 3-year span of time because they're able to get some work done in high school.
Well, I'm okay. I mean, you guys are the experts on the criteria, obviously, so I think that makes sense. And we definitely don't want to like over explain it to the point that, we're messing up the kid's ability to take them. So that makes sense with not specifying which one and just, like she said, you have all of them. You already have them. Okay.
Yes, I have all of those in there, so if you guys are okay.
Yeah, I'm
with
okay
those
with
changes.
So how many science classes? They have to have 3, right? And how many of social studies or history do they have? 3?
So that is specified for social studies and 1 other social studies, a U.S. history credit, and a 0.5 for government and econ. And in regards to science, if they're a 4-year college bound student, they typically have 4 because they have to have 3 labs.
All right, sounds good then. Anything else?
I think we have a few more proposals.
Moving on then to academic assistance, we wanted to be sure to add back in kindergarten. I'm not sure why
Oh,
it just says,
under
yeah,
Yes.
grades 1 and 2 only. We wanted to make sure to include kindergarten there. And then, yes. Sorry, I thought it was on the next page. Before that, Christy, in the academic assistance, the second paragraph about the literacy assessment portfolio, We wanted it to read, a literacy assessment portfolio will be developed for each student who is not demonstrating grade level reading proficiency in grades K through 3. That's where the literacy assessment portfolios are, okay? And then
Is that because you don't utilize that after?
they're required by the Read to Succeed Act, they're required to have a literacy assessment portfolio up through 3rd grade. And then in 3rd grade, that's where they're required, if they are scoring at a not net 1, then they have to go to the reading camp, summer reading camp, or they have to have good cause exemptions. You'll see that on the next page, but that's just up until 3rd grade.
Okay, yeah.
Then on the next page, that's where the Read to Succeed information is at, that Ms. Bays was just asking about. That's all required to be put in there.
Busy stuff. Can I throw in 2 other things on this page here?
Yep.
Actually, right before the Read to Succeed, there's a portion that is recommended for deletion regarding student eligibility for athletics if they are retained. And I wanted to address that with the group, whether we wanted to maintain that in here. It's not included in the model policy. It was district information before.
I think that that is in another policy with grading. That references the uniform grading policy, I believe.
About
The
being eligible for athletics if you were retained. Okay.
Correct. But we can verify that.
I don't remember that.
Can you pull that up on the screen, the one what you're talking about, the athletics?
It's,
Yes. The part that I'm referencing? Okay, yes. So it is, Shelley, if you can, sorry, it's
Is it?
one tiny at the top.
Like that crossed off?
There you go,
Okay.
yes.
So that is obviously not high school, that's middle school and down, correct?
Yes, but it could be applicable to middle school students who are playing high school sports. Yes,
Well, I need middle school.
and middle school sports, yes.
Well, I'll be honest with you, if the student's retained, I don't like the blanket statement of ineligibility. And again, if you're gonna say, athletics, you need to say extracurriculars. Extracurricular is extracurricular.
Right.
And again, blanket wise, if you retain them and they're doing well, then again, those are motivators for kids. And I would say to say for the entire year, you can't be involved in extracurricular activities is very punitive. And for some of these kids, that is what will help them do what they need to do.
I just wanted to, I just want to make sure we discussed it.
That was in the policy.
Because it was
That's
previously.
what
So
we were in our
you're
policy.
striking it out.
Well, it's not in the model policy.
It's not it, yeah,
And
and that's
you said-
why.
So have we been enforcing that?
Well, I believe, if I had to guess, when you look down to the next section, which is weirdly under the Read to Succeed, but shouldn't be, I believe it was intended to address students who are held back against the recommendation of the school to be retained for other reasons. Yes,
The parents have chosen.
yes.
Yeah.
And so, and that is addressed below as well, and maybe that's the better place to leave that, because then it is specifically, if we choose to keep
Oh.
that section right above good cause exemptions, it would address only students who are retained against the advice of the school by the parents. And so perhaps that's who we want that information to be applicable to, or maybe not at all. I just want to make sure the group discusses it. So-
and why, and it comes up in middle school because of high school readings. That's,
Why does it not apply to high school?
Because they don't get retained in high school.
Oh, yeah.
You just turn
Good point.
credits,
Yeah, yeah.
You matriculate.
I think-
Part of this may, just so y'all know, part of this may fix itself a little bit anyway. I don't know the number of requests you guys receive, but because we're starting to reinvigorate middle school programs, the expectation is middle school students, unless they absolutely demonstrate this wonderful ability that they should be participating at the high school level, will participate at the middle school level, unless the program doesn't exist. So,
Well, do you think the middle school sports is gonna cover like all sports, just?
well, I.
Or the
I
ones
mean,
that would probably
yeah.
be more of an issue with, because you're not really,
Yeah.
that's not an issue with like the middle school.
Yes. Yeah. So I do think it would, I think it will fix itself a little bit. I just would hate for us to have something in language again that penalizes a student for an entire school year, especially if it's really more driven by the parent.
Well, so I guess the question would be then if we go ahead and delete this section above the read to succeed
Yeah.
and then address this second section, the part that I have particularly highlighted was really beginning where it says, should a parent or legal guardian, I'm sorry, Shelley, if you could scroll down just a little bit,
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you specify.
right
Yeah.
there in that second red line paragraph, not the first two sentences, but the third sentence starts with, should a parent, legal guardian require that a student be retained without the recommendation of a principal? It goes on to that. It speaks about the district's ability to charge them tuition as well as their ineligibility for athletics.
But why is that? That's not in the model policy?
But like, that is not in the model
Currently
policy.
in our policy.
It is currently in the
Could a
policy.
parent choose to just, I mean, maybe I'm ignorant again, but could a parent just choose to be retaining their student because even though the principal doesn't recommend it, they just feel like they're just not where they need to be, like emotionally or?
But wouldn't the principal get on board if the child were honestly
That's what I'm-
emotionally
You would
ready?
think, yeah.
I would think, I can't imagine.
So it's gonna be very difficult for a principal to deny, like a principal to just deny.
Making A's and B's, and they're mature for every other student in grade levels.
Will you repeat that? I couldn't hear you. Sorry.
Kelly's got a good point.
I'm saying we have instances where parents choose, often in fifth and eighth grades, for their students to not be promoted, even though they may be in gifted and talented programs, high school credit courses in eighth grade. They're making A and B honor roll.
What would
They
be the
are,
reasoning? Are you talking
they
about?
choose to retain them.
Okay.
They choose.
So at that point, though, you could say you have to pay tuition.
But like and maybe I'm wrong, but I've heard of people who maybe in the same grade level have students that are meeting like a 60%, so they're technically passing, but they're like maybe like one of the youngest in the grade. Like they have an August birthday, but their parent feels like they're not proficient enough in the.
But what she's saying is very different. She's
Yes,
saying. you
I'm
can
saying-
take a
I'm not
child
saying that
making
doesn't
honor roll
happen.
in gay classes and their child
Yes.
parent is, that's different. To
I
me,
get that.
if you have a child who's barely passing and clearly immature, I feel like.
Do you think the principal
say,
would, like, if they were at a DE and the parent, I'm just trying, like,
I can provide some.
yes,
Because I
yes.
haven't-
I don't-
I haven't been in the middle school when this had to come before.
Yeah.
Because before we had this in place, if you failed, you were retained. So then we had parents making their child purposely fail.
Ew.
Like,
that's
take,
awful.
take the zeros, not turn in any work, sitting in the classroom, and like Kelly said, would knock out the test scores because they wanted the next 2 years to compete at the high school level at 19 versus competing at the high school at 17 or 18.
I'm just talking about the D students who pass that, I just don't want to inadvertently penalize the students whose parents are like, hey, maybe you just need an extra year to like get this information.
That's why.
I don't know.
Correct me if I'm wrong. We used to have a committee. The teachers were there, the principal's there, parent came in, presented their situation. And this is only if the teachers didn't come to a conclusion that this academically the child needed to stay
Like
behind.
if my kid
Many
had
times
a
they
bunch
can
of
only,
D,
yeah, right there with the
we
parent,
tried.
if that's the situation.
like I just think if my kids had Ds, even if, and they were like maybe younger in the grade, I would be like, maybe we should like, so you can,
But all of that is presented later in the policy of, or that, those are considerations that aren't looked at.
okay. Yeah,
But like I said, we had.
Well, I
we
think we
put
should
the-
consider.
I don't
putting that
mind
Back in there then,
considering it in that,
personally.
do you think we
Yeah,
should?
but when we put the fail, then you get to stay back. That's when parents literally had gate students, straight A students all the way to that point, retained, so they can hold back for athletics. And so that's why we tried to do it this way, because that way, if you truly want to do that. But yeah, it was quite a lot back then. I mean, there was a lot of good kids
You don't want to not include it and have that happen more because then the
Correct.
exceptions of the D students, the
Yeah.
principal is going to make the accommodations more likely versus the other way around, you can't undo.
And that's why we
Yeah,
had, that's why we had a team meeting with the teachers, because the teachers truly know this kid's capable or not capable. And
Right.
if they're not capable, then yes, we hold them back without the penalty.
Yes, this is only if it is against the
I agree.
recommendation of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
principal and the
I
district
think we
superintendent.
should consider putting that back.
So then my recommendation would be if it stays, that we move it to the previous section because somehow in this, it is under the read to succeed. I think it was because the way the previous policy was structured and it doesn't make any sense under the third grade read to succeed.
under
So
the-
I think we just move it back up to above read to succeed, with a mandated retention.
Even all of the components of the athletic section.
Well, I had recommended from the should a parent or legal guardian require, but I think if we want to talk about more of that, we can.
How was that clarification?
I missed that, sorry.
The first part says parent, legal guardian must be notified. Is that what you mean? Commissioner Brown? No.
I just needed to know what sections you were recommending to.
Oh,
me.
the section at the top. I think, I mean, we can go back to that. I think
We're,
The-
I don't, you're
the
trying to put
group
under
seemed like we
retention,
wanted to
grades
remove
one.
that section. Yes. Remove the section above read to succeed, but then move this part that is under it to where that other section is.
There are two other policies to deal with the eligibility for athletics, that's JJ and JJI. So those things are in there regarding, they have to have authority on engagements or they have to pass. That's, those are the five.
Okay,
If they're not here.
and put that, where do you want to put the sports one under?
Above the read to succeed state mandated, so that it is in the general retention section and not the third grade read to succeed, because it would be applicable to all the retentions, not students who have retained under read to succeed, because obviously the principal is required to support that retention, so.
I think that's better.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, Ms. Easton, I feel like I could.
I think we were good then until acceleration of students in grades 1 through 8. And the first thing that we wanted to change there is a district exam. That last sentence in the first paragraph, a district exam will be given to determine. We wanted to say there that there is a process, something about there's a process and the following will be reviewed to determine criteria, and the following criteria will be used for decision making. And so we wanted to include back the highest achievement level on all areas of the appropriate state assessment and score at or above the 98th percentile on an approved national achievement test. The student's chronological age, emotional and social development, and maturity level must be appropriate for the requested replacement. Cognitive development, background experiences, and rigor of the post-curriculum program. So those would stay the same. But the other two we had, and I think Ms. Dr. Massey had.
Because I want to show that it's a process, that the criteria that we listed, that the state listed is not a checkoff to do. To go to the next paragraph from the state document where it says, it's the third line, the parent or legal guardian who requests acceleration of his or her child must do so in writing to the school principal, who in turn will convene a committee to review the request. That line can be moved to the first paragraph after best academic interests to show families in the community that there is a process involved, that we are not just using that checklist to check things off and then just move, but it does involve a committee, and it's not just a school-based decision, and also parents are empowered to advocate for their student.
So do you have something to read, to sum that up?
Yes.
I'll be happy do it if you want me to.
Please do.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so going first with that first line, any student who warrants consideration for acceleration and or adjustment either in subject instructional level or grade placement for all subjects will be carefully evaluated in order to determine the education program in his or her best academic interests. And then it'll read, a parent or legal guardian who requests acceleration of his or her child must do so in writing to the school principal, who in turn will convene a committee to review the request. An evaluation process selected at the district's discretion will be administered to determine readiness, and the following criteria will be used for decision-making. And so then it starts the bulleted list, academic achievement level and aptitude levels at the 98th percentile or higher on state or nationally normed assessments, state and nationally, thank you, nationally normed assessments. We've got cognitive ability, background experiences, emotional and social development, maturity level, and rigor of the newly proposed curriculum programs. And then go back to that second paragraph. This is the proposal. Upon completion of the evaluation process, the committee will meet with a parent or guardian to review his or her recommendation and then forward said recommendation to the superintendent or designee for review and final approval.
I think that sounds great. One question for you is, do you want, is there like a time frame in which they need to apply for that?
Beautiful question.
Yeah. Can I add?
That's a beautiful question. I fear that the state document doesn't have it.
Yeah. Because it is difficult to do in the middle of the year.
That's
How
awesome.
often does that happen?
I can speak for the elementary level. At the elementary level, we've had more in recent years. Not necessarily that they were approved. I'd say we've had 5 or 6 so far this year. Kelly, you were talking
It
about.
sounds like a time-consuming process.
It is.
That's what I'm saying, and to do it mid-year, do we have like, what's our like cutoff for like kind of shifting around teachers and determining our classes? Like, could it be by then? You know what I mean? Because, we have like our numbers and then we kind of,
I think that's too close to the start of the school year.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
still doing that all the way up to, I mean, we said it.
well, I'm like, kind of like, I think it'd be difficult. I'm talking like, by the, what's that week? 10 weeks in the school or something?
Till the 45th day.
45th day. Like, would that be too soon to determine that? Like, cut that off? Like, you have up until the 45th day
For the next school year or for that current
for
school year?
that current? So it's not like a mid-year, I don't know, is that a reasonable, or would that help, or would that be bad?
Recently that wanted to move from 8th grade math to algebra 1, and by that time, they missed
They missed the
the
time.
seat time.
By 45 days.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So like, what would your recommendation, I think it's important you put timeframes, because I think then that just, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I feel
That's a
like.
great question.
So is there a recommendation by the people who experience this firsthand that can recommend to the board what would be a reasonable timeframe?
It's like, so could it feasibly be upon the request to a school by a parent, there's 30 days, once that request is made, that the process begin and end with the final?
Oh, I'm not even, I'm talking about even more to request it.
Like by July 1st.
But I'm not opposed to that either.
I'm thinking at the end of 1 year, going into the
Like by
next.
the time
I
they get
know, I just-
registration
Started school and you're in the middle of the year.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm.
It's too late.
What's impacting is that we have a lot of new district student families.
And then you can make an exception, like if you're transferring from outside the district, you have, X amount of days, 30 days from the time you transfer to make that
Sure.
request. But like, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but I
No.
do think, like, I just to leave it up in the air and like, anytime in the school year, you can just decide that you want to apply for
Usually
this.
we get contacted and principals get contacted at the administration of a screener for, like, for example, fall map.
Yeah.
Families will get results, or they'll have that teacher conference, and then parents will contact administrators, and the administrators will reach out and talk to
That's.
district students. First
You
with.
do like the initial, like if you're a returning student by like, when your registration is due, you make that request, and then for new transfers, you have 30 days.
I mean,
Why would you not do that the year before then? If you're
whatever, I'm just like throwing a deadline up there. I'm not opposed to whatever you recommend the deadline be. I'm just trying to make it reasonable so you're not getting it in the school year.
And also it could be, broadcasting that there's a deadline for grade acceleration may warrant
Yes.
communication.
Do y'all feel like a deadline is necessary? Or would be helpful?
I just, because we make these decisions, but ultimately you're the ones who are impacted by those decisions. So we
Yes.
want to make sure, our policies,
And our
A,
schools.
help you, help your administrators and, do what they need to do. So, I'm like registration or by the end of the previous school year. Is there like a, do you?
What would they on registration?
I mean, effective.
If you go past registration,
Yeah, it's.
I mean, like, I feel like if you're registering your student, you're like, hey, like, I really feel like my student's excelling, blah, 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 like, maybe I'd like to.
Over the summer registration.
Yes, like,
My only concern with using registration is that is not a stagnant, that is not a specific date.
There's
That is
always-
an
But
open
not in
time.
theory. Are you gonna try to do that over the summer?
And there's also a lot of, not just the district office involved, there's a lot of school personnel,
Yeah,
including the
they're not new.
principal and the teachers and the school psychologists that administer batteries for certain grade levels that are needed to do.
well, then how about we put a deadline in the previous year for the next year? Like by
which is typical.
mid-year
Yeah.
or third quarter or whatever it is, by third quarter the previous year, you apply for the next year. Like, or I don't know, like, I don't know where that deadline needs to be. Could you guys could we hold this, you guys discuss it and maybe bring some recommendations about timelines for like how long you want that process to take? Like you recommended or said, and then how long up until you want to allow them to apply for this? Is that reasonable?
Say a district established date, because I guess my one concern is holding off with the promotion side of things. We definitely need to let high schools know, because there will be a
Okay.
shift in how we handle promotion, and that can impact how we schedule and what type of summer offerings we provide to our students.
I'm not opposed to that. Do you think that so how would you word that, by a date established by the district or?
And it could vary. I mean, it can even vary by year because of.
Well,
different-
then you guys could change that based on like the registration or whatever, So we could revisit it later if we need to, but that way you can at least have some sort of basic guideline in place. And then if we need to like fine tune that, we can always go back, but then that won't affect the rest of the policy being passed for the other reasons that we need it.
Yes, I think that's.
We'll have to add in something for those who are new to district. and people
Absolutely.
Moving in, maybe we
Yes.
give them 10 school days to
Yes.
make their request.
Yes. So I agree, like, cutoff is by a date predetermined, issued by the district or whatever. Unless you're an out-of-district transfer, you have X amount of days from the date you transfer.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly do that and we'll develop that as a district practice, so.
And we have more changes.
I think that's all on this one. Is that all the proposed changes on this one?
Because when she read that, that took out the other sentences, the ones removed, so yes, she reorganized, so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I accept all her changes she made, and I think they're wonderful, in addition to the proposed changes I made.
Okay.
And then I'm good with that going out to committee.
Which ones did you make?
Well, the one that I just said, with that.
Oh, about the deadline, yes, okay.
Yeah.
New
Yeah.
district.
And then the ones that.
Verbiage.
And out of district, so the in district and the out of district, the.
Okay, so with all the changes.
Woo.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. That it?
Yes, that's all for that.
Okay, all right, let's go. That one, we move on to first reading, all the changes.
Okay.
All the changes.
All the changes. All right, and I will put that and put it up in the board's folder before the next board meeting when it's up for first reading, so everybody can review if there are any questions about the changes.
Perfect. With that,
Sounds
Yes.
good.
All right, next up is policy JB, equal educational opportunity, non-discrimination. This policy just needed to be updated. It was an older policy and some of the language was sort of out of date. So we updated that and as well updated who the contact persons were for different types of grievances based on discrimination within the district.
No, it's fine. I feel like when I open them on my computer, they're red line. When I open one
Yes,
here,
it only works on computers.
drives me bonkers.
I think it depends on which version of Word it is.
So is this just essentially updating it to be in line with the model policy?
Yes, and updating the different district staff who are responsible for different types of discrimination. The one, I did have one recommended change on this one is on the, I guess really the third paragraph, but the first paragraph that would say every student of this school district, that the last sentence be changed to say the district also provides equal access to those groups designated as youth groups as required by law. Because the model policy specifically listed Boy Scouts, but the statute actually lists several groups and might change over time because groups can apply to the legislature to be added. So we would just reference the statute there instead of identifying specific groups.
So do you, I mean, I get why you're listing the people, but does that mean every time we have a change in employees, we need to?
Yeah, so some of them we listed, we tried to list the departments, but some of them it's not, like Dr. Harrison is our Title IX coordinator. We're required to disclose a specific name of a person. We can't just say the district's Title IX coordinator. We have to identify who that person specifically is. So.
And like special services as well.
Yeah, we could probably change special services, I think.
It just
Dr.
stinks because
Gass
then we're gonna have
would
to
prefer to
re-update this policy every time. Not saying, hopefully we don't have like big turnover or anything, but like what if somebody gets a promotion or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It's fine. I mean, I'm fine with that because do you think we should change job? Yeah, into special services at least, so we're not like the only one we'd have to change and be Dr.
I mean, I don't think it's, I don't have, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
It's fine, yeah.
But it's just, you know, the policy committee is regularly meeting if we needed to. But
Yeah.
that's not big of a deal.
I will also say that, you know, if a grievance was submitted to the incorrect person, it will be sent to the correct person. We're never going to say, we're not taking this, you sent it to the wrong person. We will just forward it to the right person.
Right.
Any other concerns about that one?
Yeah, good,
Okay.
sorry, all right. Send that one on for first reading.
Okay. And then JKA, restraint, seclusion, and intentional physical contact. So this is a proposal to take the place of the previous JKA, which is up for second reading for deletion for the policy regarding corporal punishment. Again, this policy is very significantly different from that one, so we are just deleting that one and then starting fresh. And this is the model policy. I don't believe that there were any recommended changes except on the second page where it provides examples of seclusion. Because in policy, we generally try to avoid providing specific examples of something. We already provide a definition of what seclusion is. And so we would prefer to remove the examples and just stick to the definition that can be determined by the schools, whether something constituted seclusion or not.
I'm gonna like rack my brain why we tabled this and what's the specific item we were looking at.
We tabled it because we just recommended removal of JKA because we didn't have the district staff who deal often with restraint available at that meeting. And so Ms. Ally Williams is here today.
Okay.
Happy to address any questions that you have on that, but we just tabled it because of availability of staff at that meeting. And because there were two versions of JKA
Right, yeah.
that were out there in the world. And I think it was discussed that we wanted to try to move forward with this one.
And so we're seclusion as like, what did you say?
to remove the examples, where it says examples of seclusion, include the following. Typically, we try not to include examples in board policy, and there is a definition right above that.
So you want to remove that?
Yes, just the examples.
And then as far as you're concerned, do you feel like this is sufficient? Do you feel like it's, okay? I just don't want to put you in a bad position either, so I want to make sure that we're defining, explaining things well enough that it's not like social.
And there are a good number of district practices that go along with this in terms of training that staff receive and report.
Do we notate like any required training in the policy?
We don't notate the specific training.
Like,
let
do
Ms.
we
Williams speak
notate
to.
that they are required to have training?
Yes, it says under the restraint that they're required to have training unless, if you look under the safety emergencies, there are some circumstances where there are emergencies where staff could intervene even if they're not trained.
And then do we not want to specify training because it changes, updates? Right. Yeah. That's-
Then the last policy we have for today is JLIB, student dismissal precautions. And this policy is being updated. It was last updated in 2001 and is not really in line with practices of the district or statute in terms of dismissal in custodial situations. So I have a couple recommended changes to this one. The first would be that we recommend leaving in principal and or his or her designee, because it's not always the principal who checks students out or approves students leaving.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering when I saw that. I was
Yeah.
like, do you really want the principal having to sign off on every single time?
Yeah, so it would be a recommendation to leave his or her designee in there. A recommendation to remove the last sentence of that paragraph, that the parent must request all non-emergency dismissals in writing prior to the requested dismissal. I'm happy to defer to some of our other staff on that, but I don't know that we typically make parents tell us in advance that they're coming to check out a student prior to getting there.
Yeah.
Right.
Stuff can come up.
Right.
As long as they're there by the required time that they're. You know,
Yeah.
and even then, there's, it's at the
Right.
discretion.
The next recommendation would be in that little short one sentence paragraph, just to change it, obtaining permission from the principal or designee, again, to make sure that there are other people who might be available to provide that permission. And then under release of child to non-custodial parent, it would be my recommendation that we delete all of that language in that paragraph and replace it with students will be dismissed in accordance with custody paperwork on file with the school. If no paperwork is on file, students will be dismissed pursuant to custody as determined by state statute. We deal with that a very good bit, and just want to make sure that what we're saying is true, because what is written here is not necessarily in line with or statute in terms of custody visitation. So. And then the last paragraph, I was going to recommend that it's in the model policy that we add, if possible, the school should attempt to obtain, because we don't have the authority to force someone to provide us more paperwork, so. Any other questions or concerns about that?
I think with your changes, that was the only concern I had too, so. Yep, looks good to me.
That's all we have for today.
Okay, excellent. All right, so, and we have no public comments. Okay, so at this time, thank you all very much for your help. We appreciate it, and we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, to be respectful of everybody's time, since I have the cabinet here,